Hello, and welcome back. Or if this is your first time finding this little corner, there's no need to rush here. Nothing at all. Find yourself a comfortable position, won't you? Feel the weight of your body slowly sinking down. Feel the soft blanket wrapping around you. Out there, the modern world is still spinning with its lights, its notifications, its never-ending to-do lists that seem to multiply in the darkness. But here, in this space, we're going to leave all of that behind. History is usually told through glorious battles, great kings, earth-shattering revolutions, but that history doesn't help us sleep. The history we seek tonight is different. It lives in the quiet moments, in the work that repeats itself until it becomes almost boring, in the lives of people whose names have long since turned to dust. Tonight, I invite you to become one of those people with me. We won't be a king or a knight. We'll be something more mysterious, a medieval alchemist. Don't rush to imagine flashing magical lights or gleaming gold bars. Forget the fairy tales. The secret life we're about to discover is far more mundane than that. It smells of coal smoke, dried herbs, and persistent failure. It sounds like water drops falling steadily from a distillation flask, and the soft rustling of fingers turning through pages of ancient parchment. This is an invitation to be allowed to be bored, to find peace in the smallest details. And if you find these stories interesting enough to follow future journeys, consider gently subscribing to the channel. No need to rush. Perhaps tomorrow morning, when you wake, now, take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Let your mind become empty, because tonight you are no longer yourself. You are an alchemist, and your workshop is waiting. But before we step through that heavy wooden door, before we descend into the stone chamber that will become our world, let's pause for a moment. Let's talk about what it means to seek the impossible. You see, in this age, let's say it's the year 1387, somewhere in what we now call Germany. Being an alchemist isn't quite what people imagine. You're not a wizard. You're not exactly a scientist either, though that word won't exist for centuries yet. You're something in between, a seeker, a person who believes that the universe operates according to hidden principles, and that with enough patience, enough observation, enough careful work, those principles can be discovered. The rain outside grows a little heavier now, drumming against the small window of your workshop. It's a sound that has remained unchanged for centuries. Rain on glass, rain on stone, rain on the wooden shutters of houses where people sleep, dream, and wake to do their work again. Your neighbors think various things about you. Some believe you're in league with dark forces. Others think you're a learned physician who can cure ailments that regular doctors cannot touch. A few suspect you might actually be able to turn lead into gold, though they'd never ask directly. The truth is simpler and more complex than any of these ideas. You are someone who has chosen to spend your life asking a single question. What if? What if base metals aren't truly different from precious ones, but simply unfinished? What if the same forces that make plants grow from seeds, that turn winter into spring, that cause the stars to move in their careful patterns, what if those same forces can be understood and guided by human hands? It's a beautiful question, a dangerous question, and a question that will keep you busy for the rest of your life. Working in this small stone room with your strange instruments and your careful notes and your endless patience. The workshop we're about to enter isn't grand. There are no soaring towers filled with bubbling cauldrons, no dramatic lightning crackling between copper rods. Instead, imagine a room that feels almost like a kitchen. If kitchens were designed by someone who spent too much time reading philosophy books, the ceiling is low, supported by thick wooden beams, darkened by years of smoke. The walls are stone, fitted together so carefully that even after decades, barely any wind finds its way through. Along these walls, shelves hold dozens of ceramic jars, glass bottles, and small wooden boxes. Each container is labeled in your careful handwriting, though the labels would seem strange to modern eyes. Sal ammoniac, aqua vitae, mercurius vulgaris, antimony of the wise. In the center of the room stands your furnace. Not quite an oven, not quite a fireplace. It's built of clay bricks and designed to hold steady temperatures for hours, days, even weeks at a time. Around it, your instruments wait. Glass vessels in shapes that seem to defy purpose. Copper pipes that curl and twist like frozen snakes. And always, the smell of experiments in progress. But the most important thing in this room isn't any of the equipment. It's time itself. Time that moves differently here than it does in the world outside. Out there, people wake with the sun, work through the day, and sleep when darkness falls. Here, in the workshop, time is measured differently. By the slow drip of condensation. By the gradual change in color of a solution heated for weeks. By the patient grinding of minerals into powder so fine it feels like silk between your fingers. This is where we'll spend our time together tonight. In a place where nothing happens quickly, where success is measured in tiny increments, and where the greatest discoveries come not from sudden inspiration, but from simple willingness to continue the work day after day, even when, especially when, it seems like nothing is happening at all. There's something almost hypnotic about this kind of work, something that our modern world has largely forgotten. It's the rhythm of repetition, the meditation of focused attention, the strange peace that comes from doing something with your hands while your mind grows quiet. Tonight, as we explore this secret life, you might find your own mind beginning to quiet. You might notice your breathing slowing to match the steady rhythm of rain on the window. You might feel your thoughts becoming less urgent, less necessary, like distant conversations from a house you're no longer visiting. This is exactly what should happen. Because the real secret of the medieval alchemist isn't in the formulas or the equipment or even the search for gold. The real secret is in the willingness to disappear into the work, to become so absorbed in the careful measurement, the patient observation, the gentle tending of fires and solutions, that the everyday self simply isn't needed anymore. For the next hour or so, you don't have to be anyone but this, a person in a quiet room, working with their hands, paying attention to small changes, listening to the sound of water drops and burning wood and their own steady breathing. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to achieve anything. You just have to continue to be present with the work, whatever the work requires. And if you find yourself drifting off during our time together, well, that's perfectly all right too. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply allow ourselves to rest, to let go, to trust that the world will continue spinning without our constant attention. The workshop is ready. The fires are lit. The experiments are waiting. Shall we begin? You wake not because of sunlight. In this stone cellar, day and night make little difference. You wake because of the cold, cold that seeps through the wool blanket, cold that settles into your bones. The stone floor beneath your feet is ice cold, a cold so familiar you barely notice it anymore. The first task, always the first task, is the fire. You move slowly toward the furnace, the heart of the entire room. Yesterday's coals are nothing but faint red glows now, weak and dying. You carefully use the iron tongs, coaxing the surviving embers back to life. Warmth breathes against your face, a thin warmth. You place several dry logs you prepared last night. They're arranged with calculation, not too tight, not too loose, so air can flow through. You take the leather bellows, an old tool, cracked and worn, and begin to blow. 1 breath, 2 breaths. You're breathing steady, matching the rhythm of the room itself. Don't rush. If you blow too hard, the ash will scatter everywhere, smothering the last living sparks. Too gentle, and the flame won't catch. This is the first lesson of an alchemist, patience in every breath. And then, a small flame trembles to life. It licks at the dry wood, creating a soft hiss. The shadows in the room begin to dance. The glass vessels of every shape, the clay pots, the towering stacks of books. They slowly emerge from the darkness, like old friends greeting the morning. In the flickering firelight, you can see your workspace more clearly. It's not tidy at all. Dust covers everything. A fine, gray dust made from coal, from ash, and from minerals ground to powder. The air has a distinctive smell, a mixture of sulfur, old paper, damp moss on the stone walls, and something slightly sour from an experiment that failed last week. You're accustomed to it now. This scent is the smell of work, the smell of seeking. You step to a heavy oak table, its surface scarred with countless cuts, burns, and stains that defy identification. On it, an experiment is in progress. A glass vessel with a curved neck, called a retort, sits on a bed of hot sand. Inside, an amber liquid bubbles very, very slowly, drop by drop, condensing in the cooler curved neck, then falling into a small collecting jar below. You lean closer to examine the collecting jar. After a full night, it contains perhaps a teaspoon's worth. You spent a week preparing the materials, 3 days maintaining the fire at constant temperature, just to collect this single teaspoon of liquid. It's not gold. It doesn't even smell particularly special. But according to the ancient texts, this is one of the first steps. You don't feel disappointed. You simply feel the process continues. That's all that matters. You check the flame beneath the retort again. Too large, and the liquid will burn. Too small, and the process will stop. You adjust the sand bed, work that requires careful attention. Your fingers sense the heat radiating from the furnace, a pleasant warmth. After ensuring everything is stable, you begin the day's second tedious task, filtering water. You can't use ordinary well water. It contains too many impurities, too much unwanted life. You need pure water, rainwater. You have a crude rainwater collection system outside. The water is guided through a series of filters, gravel, fine sand, and finally linen cloth. This process also takes considerable time. You pour water into the top filter layer, one ladle at a time, and wait. Wait for the clear drops to slowly seep through, falling into a large ceramic vessel below. The sound, drip, 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 of water falling into the vessel is the only sound in the room besides the fire's crackling. It's steady, it's predictable, it's peaceful. This is your morning. Nothing dramatic, no great discoveries, just the cold, the fire, and slow work. A necessary repetition to prepare for a long day of seeking. The water filtering continues for what feels like hours. You've learned not to watch it too closely. That only makes time crawl. Instead, you turn to another task, preparing your materials for the day's experiments. From a wooden shelf, you retrieve a small ceramic jar labeled sal commune, common salt. But this isn't the salt from your kitchen table. This salt has been purified, dissolved, and recrystallized 7 times until each crystal is perfectly clear and uniform. The ancient texts speak of the salt of the wise, and while you're not entirely certain this is it, you know that purity matters in all things. You measure out exactly 12 grains, not 11, not 13, onto a small brass scale. The scale is so sensitive that your breath can disturb it, so you must work slowly, gently. Each grain catches the firelight like a tiny star. Next, you need to grind more antimony. Yesterday's grinding session produced only a small amount of powder, and today's work requires more. You place several chunks of the silvery gray mineral into your stone mortar. The pestle feels heavy in your hand. It should. A light pestle can't do this work. You begin the rhythm again. Lift the pestle up, down. A deep thump echoes. Rotate the pestle gently in the mortar. A scrape of stone against stone. Lift up, down, thump, rotate, scrape. This will be your rhythm for the next several hours. Your arm begins to ache, but you're used to it. Your mind no longer thinks about anything else. It simply focuses on this movement. Up, down, rotate. You watch the mineral fragments slowly break apart, becoming smaller pieces, then smaller still, until they become a shimmering gray powder. Occasionally, you pause, using a goose feather to sweep the powder, clinging to the mortar's sides, back down. The finer the powder, the more easily it reacts. But fine by medieval standards isn't like today. You have no machines to grind with. Your standard is when you can take a bit of powder on your fingertip, rub it gently, and feel no grit whatsoever. This process might take the entire morning, just for a handful of powder. It's almost funny to think that modern people could do this in seconds with a machine, yet they don't have time to sit still for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, you have all the time in the world, but no machines at all. While you're grinding, your eyes drift across the shelves of materials. Each substance is stored in a ceramic jar or cloth bag with symbols written in your careful handwriting. There's sulfur, the burning stone, said to carry the masculine principle and prone to volatility. There's mercury, the liquid metal, carrying the feminine principle and able to dissolve everything. There's saltpeter, which later people will use for gunpowder, but you only know as snow from China. And countless herbs, mandrake, belladonna, rosemary, each with its own properties, both medicinal and spiritual. Your laboratory is really the intersection of a pharmacy, a metalworking shop, and a philosophy library. After completing the grinding, you move to another task, one requiring more observation than strength. This is the process of putrefaction. You take a thick glass vessel containing last week's mixture. It includes lead, vinegar, and several other secret ingredients. Now, it is transformed into a slimy black mass with an unpleasant odor. This is called the negredo stage, or the blackening. Most people would throw it away, thinking the experiment had failed. But you know that, according to theory, this is a necessary step. Everything must die, must return to primordial matter, chaos, before it can be reborn in a higher form. You place this vessel in a warm spot near the furnace and simply observe it every day, for weeks, even months. You record the smallest changes. A gas bubble appears. A different colored streak forms on the surface. Its smell changes. This is another lesson in patience. Not the active patience of grinding powder, but passive patience. The patience of waiting and trusting the process, even when it looks ugly and stagnant. It's like watching a tree grow from a seedling. You can't force it. You can only provide the best conditions and wait. And while waiting, what do? You read. You turn to the bookshelf. The books here aren't like modern books. They're hand-copied on parchment, bound in wood, covered with leather, and very heavy. The ink has faded, the corners worn smooth. Some are written in Latin, others in Arabic, a language you can only read haltingly thanks to patched-together translations. The texts don't give clear formulas. They're full of symbols and metaphors. The green dragon devours the sun. The king and queen unite in a chemical wedding. Drown the old lion in virgin's tears. Your job is to decode them. You compare different texts, looking for similarities. You copy the symbols into your notebook. A circle for perfection, for gold. An upward triangle for fire. A downward triangle for water. A crescent for silver, for the moon. Sometimes you feel very close to understanding something. An unexpected connection appears, but more often, you simply feel lost in a maze of words and images. And that's fine too, because in the silence of reading, in the rustling of pages, you find a different kind of peace, the peace of constant learning. The morning continues with its slow progression of tasks. You check the distillation again. A few more drops have collected. You adjust the fire under another experiment, a different vessel where white crystals are slowly forming on a thread suspended in a solution. You grind a different mineral, this time cinnabar, which will eventually yield mercury, though that process will take weeks. Each task flows into the next without urgency. There's no clock marking the hours, no schedule to keep. Time is measured by the completion of small actions. When the powder is fine enough. When the water has finished filtering. When the fire needs more wood. This is perhaps the strangest thing about your life as an alchemist, the way time moves. In the world outside, people rush from task to task, always conscious of daylight burning away, of work left undone. But here, in this stone room, time becomes something you work with rather than against. You don't fight time or try to save it. You simply use it, the way you use water or fire or any other material in your experiments. There's something deeply satisfying about this relationship with time. No part of your work can be hurried. The liquid in the retort will condense at its own pace, regardless of your wishes. The powder will only become fine through repetition, not force. The chemical processes will unfold according to their own inner logic, which you can observe and guide but never fully control. This teaches you a different way of being in the world, a way that accepts the natural rhythm of things, a way that finds purpose in repetition rather than novelty, a way that measures success not by dramatic breakthroughs, but by the simple ability to continue the work day after day with attention and care. And there's beauty in this continuity, beauty in the small variations within repetition. Today's grinding session feels slightly different from yesterday's. The mineral breaks apart in a new pattern, or your arm finds a slightly different rhythm. Today's fire burns with a different character, perhaps because the wood is drier or the air pressure has changed. Today's observations of the putrefying matter reveal subtle alterations that yesterday couldn't show. You pause in your grinding to add another log to the fire. The flames leap up briefly, casting new shadows across the room, illuminating corners that had been dark. For a moment, everything looks different. The same objects, but revealed from new angles, with new plays of light and darkness. This, too, is part of the work. Learning to see the same things freshly. Learning to notice the small changes that constant observation reveals. Learning to read the subtle language of matter as it transforms itself according to laws you're still discovering. The morning is not yet half over, and already you've entered that state of absorbed attention that makes hours pass like minutes. Your hands work almost independently, following motions they've practiced thousands of times. Your eyes register every small change in the experiments around you. Your mind rests in the immediate present, untroubled by plans or regrets. This is the secret that no book could teach you. This is what you've learned from years of solitary work in this stone room. That the path to understanding lies not in dramatic revelations, but in sustained attention. Not in brilliant insights, but in patient observation. Not in forcing answers, but in becoming so familiar with the questions that the answers begin to reveal themselves naturally. The way flowers open when the season is right. Outside, you can hear the faint sound of the village beginning its day. A rooster crows in the distance. A cartwheel creaks along the cobblestone street. Someone calls out a greeting to a neighbor. But these sounds feel very far away, like echoes from another world. Your world is here, in this room, with these materials, with this work that has no end and no beginning, only the eternal middle of process and transformation. And somehow, in this endless middle, you've found exactly where you belong. The water filter finally empties with a last satisfying drip. The grinding is complete for now. The fire burns steadily, asking for nothing but another log in an hour or two. Everything is ready for the day's real work to begin. But there's no hurry. There's never any hurry. There's only the next step, and the next, and the next, each one taken with complete attention, each one part of the great work that will continue long after you're gone. That was happening long before you were born. That connects you to every seeker who has ever wondered what lies hidden in the heart of matter. The workshop is fully awake now, and so are you. After preparing the basics, the real work begins. The work of an alchemist is not abstract thinking. It is the work of hands. Today, you need to prepare antimony, a silvery gray mineral. The ancient texts say it carries within itself the soul of metals, but before you can use it, you must grind it to powder. Extremely fine powder. You take out a heavy stone mortar, and a stone pestle just as heavy. You drop several pieces of antimony into the mortar's bowl. They make a dry clink sound. And then you begin. Lift the pestle up, down. A deep thump resonates. Rotate the pestle gently in the mortar. A scrape of stone against stone. Lift up, down, thump, rotate, scrape. This will be your rhythm for many hours to come. Your arm begins to tire, but you're accustomed to it. Your mind no longer thinks about anything else. It simply focuses on this movement. Up, down, rotate. You observe the mineral fragments slowly breaking apart, becoming smaller pieces, then smaller still, until they become a shimmering gray powder. Occasionally, you pause, using a goose feather to sweep the powder, clinging to the mortar's sides back down. The finer the powder, the more easily it reacts. But fine by medieval standards isn't like now. You have no grinding machines. Your standard is when you can take some powder on your fingertip, rub it gently, and feel no roughness whatsoever. This process might take the entire morning, just for a small handful of powder. It's almost amusing to think that modern people could do this in seconds with a machine, yet they don't have time to sit still for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, you have all the time in the world, but no machines at all. While you're grinding, your mind wanders to the nature of the work itself. Each strike of the pestle is breaking bonds that have held these particles together since the earth was young. You're not just crushing rock. You're liberating the essential nature trapped within crude matter. At least that's what the theories suggest. The antimony glints in the firelight as it transforms. What was once solid chunks becomes an ever finer dust that catches and reflects light like tiny mirrors. You can feel the change in texture through the pestle. The resistance becomes different as the particles grow smaller. There's less jarring impact, more of a grinding sensation, almost like you're polishing something rather than breaking it. Your wrist finds its own rhythm now, independent of conscious thought. Lift, strike, turn, sweep. Lift, strike, turn, sweep. The sound becomes a kind of percussion, keeping time in the silent workshop. Outside, church bells might mark the hours for the rest of the world. But here, time is measured by the gradual transformation of matter. After what might be an hour or 3 hours, you've lost track. You pause to check your other experiments. The retort with the amber liquid has been bubbling more actively. The increased heat from the growing fire has accelerated the process. Now, instead of occasional drops, there's a steady plink, plink, plink as the condensed vapor falls into the collection vessel. You approach carefully. Too much heat and months of work could be ruined in minutes. You adjust the sand bed around the retort, creating small channels to direct the heat more evenly. This is delicate work. Your fingers must sense the temperature through the sand, feeling for hot spots that could crack the glass. The liquid inside has changed color slightly since morning. Where it was deep amber before, now it shows hints of red, like sunlight filtered through autumn leaves. This could be significant. Color changes often mark important transitions in the work. You make a note on a piece of parchment with your quill, dating it and describing exactly what you observe. Record keeping is crucial, though tedious. Every day, sometimes several times per day, you document the progress of each experiment. Not just the dramatic changes, those are rare, but the subtle shifts that only become meaningful when viewed over weeks or months. Day 43 of the third distillation, you write. Substance shows red tinges in firelight. Rate of condensation increased. Scent has become sweeter, less sharp. Weather, light rain, cool. Moon in third quarter. Yes, you note the weather and moon phases too. The ancient masters insisted that celestial influences affect the work. You're not entirely convinced, but you've learned to pay attention to patterns others might dismiss. Sometimes, correlations emerge that surprise you. You return to the grinding. The antimony is noticeably finer now, but not fine enough. Not yet. You've learned that what seems done to an impatient eye is merely halfway to the true goal. Real fineness takes time that stretches beyond comfort, beyond the point where progress seems to have stopped. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape. As you work, you think about the nature of patience itself. There are different kinds of patience you've discovered. There's the patience of waiting, passive, sometimes frustrating. But there's also the patience of doing, active, almost meditative. This grinding is the second kind. Each strike serves a purpose. Each repetition brings measurable change, even when that change is too small to see in any single moment. This is perhaps what the outside world least understands about your work. People imagine alchemy as dramatic, explosions of light, sudden transformations, magical revelations. But the reality is this: hours upon hours of repetitive manual labor, performed with absolute attention to detail. Yet there's something deeply satisfying about this kind of work. Something that connects you to every craftsperson who has ever sought to perfect their skill through repetition. The baker kneading dough, the blacksmith shaping metal, the scribe copying manuscripts, all of you working with your hands to transform raw materials into something refined, something purposeful. You pause again. Another experiment requires attention. In a shallow pan over low heat, sulfur is being gently warmed. Sulfur is tricky, too much heat, and it burns with a blue flame and choking smoke. Too little, and it remains stubbornly solid. But at just the right temperature, it melts into a dark red liquid that flows like honey. You've been heating the sulfur for 2 days, bringing it slowly to the melting point, then letting it cool, then warming it again. Each cycle changes its properties slightly. The color deepens. The texture becomes more uniform. Most importantly, it becomes more receptive to combination with other substances. Using a long iron rod, you gently stir the molten sulfur. It moves sluggishly, reluctantly. The surface shows swirling patterns where the cooler surface layer mixes with the hotter liquid below. These patterns are beautiful in their own way. Golden spirals and curves that form and dissolve like tiny galaxies being born and dying. Working with sulfur taught you one of your first lessons about the temperament of materials. Substances have personalities, almost like living things. Sulfur is impatient, volatile, quick to anger if mishandled. Mercury is fluid, adaptable, but also elusive. It slips away from attempts to confine it. Salt is steady, reliable, but stubborn about dissolving unless conditions are exactly right. Learning to work with these temperaments is like learning to work with people. You must understand what each substance wants, what conditions it thrives in, what combinations it welcomes or resists. Force rarely works. Persuasion, patience, and careful attention to each material's nature. These are the tools that succeed. You return to your grinding. But now the antimony requires a different approach. The particles are small enough that the regular thumping technique would simply scatter the powder. Instead, you begin a circular grinding motion, pressing down firmly while rotating the pestle slowly around the mortar's bowl. This new motion creates a different sound, less percussion, more of a continuous scraping whisper. It's actually quite soothing, like the sound of sand shifting on a beach. The powder becomes finer and finer until it begins to feel more like a cream than a powder. While you grind, your eyes drift across the workshop's shelves. Each container holds a different lesson in patience learned. That jar of white powder took 6 months to prepare. It started as crude salt from the Dead Sea, carried here by traders who had no idea of its true value. Through repeated dissolutions, crystallizations, and purifications, it became something entirely different. A salt so pure, it doesn't even taste salty anymore, but has a subtle sweetness that lingers on the tongue. The blue crystals in the corner vessel required a full year of careful tending. They grow so slowly you can't see the change from day to day, but over months, needle-thin crystals extend themselves like frozen lightning. They say these crystals can hold the essence of copper even when copper itself is absent. A curious property you're still investigating. That brownish oil was extracted from cinnabar through a process so lengthy you sometimes forgot what you were trying to achieve. First, the cinnabar had to be ground. Weeks of work, similar to what you're doing now. Then heated in a sealed vessel for months. Then distilled through an apparatus so complex it took up half the workshop for 3 seasons. The final result, a few ounces of liquid that some texts claim can dissolve gold itself. Each of these preparations taught you something about the relationship between time and transformation. Rushing leads to impurity, incomplete change, materials that look right but lack the essential properties you seek. Only by allowing each process its full duration do you obtain substances that truly embody their intended nature. You check the water filtration system again. The morning's rainwater has finally worked its way through all the layers. What emerges at the bottom is crystal clear, so pure it seems to bend light differently than ordinary water. This water will be crucial for today's main experiment, an attempt to dissolve mercury in a solution that shouldn't theoretically be able to hold it. The mercury itself sits in a small glass flask, a silvery puddle that moves with impossible fluidity. Mercury fascinates you. It's clearly a metal. You can tell by its weight, its luster, its conductivity of heat. Yet it flows like water, divides and reunites like a living thing, and refuses to hold any shape you try to impose on it. Working with mercury requires special care. Its vapor can be dangerous. You've learned this through experience you'd rather not repeat. You work with it only in small quantities, only when the air is moving well, and never for extended periods. Even so, it seems to find its way into everything. Tiny droplets hide in cracks in the workbench, roll into corners, and seem to watch you with their perfect spherical eyes. But mercury is essential to the work. It's called the universal solvent because it can absorb other metals, dissolving them completely, yet holding their essence within itself. Gold, silver, copper, tin, all can disappear into mercury, then be recovered later through careful heating. It's like mercury has the ability to temporarily erase the boundaries between different types of matter, You pour a small amount of the purified water into a clean vessel, then add 3 drops of mercury. They sink to the bottom and rest there, completely separate from the water, like tiny silver coins. Now comes the delicate part, adding a solution that will convince these two incompatible substances to unite. The solution you're adding was prepared last month through its own lengthy process. It's made from antimony, like what you're grinding now, dissolved in a special acid, then treated with sal ammoniac, then distilled, then treated again. The process has so many steps, you have to refer to your notes to remember them all. As you add this solution drop by drop, you watch for any change in the mercury's behavior. At first, nothing. The silver droplets remain stubbornly separate, unchanged. But after the 7th drop, you notice something subtle. The mercury's surface becomes less mirror-like. A faint cloudiness appears, as if the perfect metallic surface is being somehow softened. This is the moment you've been working toward for weeks. Not a dramatic transformation, but a subtle shift that suggests the barriers between substances are beginning to dissolve. You make careful notes, recording the exact number of drops, the appearance of the change, the time of day, the weather, everything that might be relevant. Success in this work is measured differently than in most human endeavors. There are no complete victories, no final achievements. There are only small signs of progress, hints that you're moving in the right direction, suggestions that your theories might contain some fragment of truth. You've learned to find satisfaction in these small confirmations. The way a solution clarifies after weeks of cloudiness. The formation of the first tiny crystal in a supersaturated liquid. The moment when two substances that should repel each other show the first sign of compatibility. These are the victories that sustain you through the long periods of apparent failure. The experiments that produce nothing but foul smells and useless residues. The weeks when every attempt seems to move you further from understanding rather than closer. The antimony under your pestle has reached a new stage of fineness. When you rub it between your fingers, it feels more like silk than powder. Each particle has been broken down so thoroughly that the substance has almost become something else entirely. Still antimony, but antimony liberated from its crude, earthly form. This is one of the central mysteries of the work. At what point does a substance stop being what it was and become what it could be? The antimony looks like antimony, has the weight of antimony, will test as antimony in any examination you can perform. Yet somehow, through this process of patient refinement, it has become more receptive to transformation, more willing to participate in combinations that the crude ore would have resisted. It's as if the grinding has awakened something that was always present but dormant. Not magic exactly, but something more subtle, a responsiveness, a readiness to engage with other substances in new ways. You carefully transfer the finished powder to a clean vessel, using a bone spoon to avoid any contamination from metal. The powder flows almost like a liquid, so fine that it seems to pour rather than fall. In the firelight, it has an almost ethereal quality, as if it's not quite solid anymore. With the antimony complete, you turn to other tasks that fill the middle hours of the day. There's always something that needs tending in a workshop like this. Fires to maintain, solutions to check, crystals to examine for growth, distillations to monitor. You examine a vessel where salt crystals have been growing for the past month. They form perfect cubes, so regular they seem almost artificial. But you know they grew themselves, following laws of form that operate whether humans understand them or not. Each crystal is transparent as water, yet structured as precisely as any building. These crystals represent another kind of patience, the patience of allowing things to grow at their own pace. You provided the conditions, the right concentration of salt water, the right temperature, the right stillness. But the crystals themselves did the work of growth, molecule by molecule, following an inner pattern you can observe but not control. There's something profound about this relationship between human intention and natural process. You can create the conditions for transformation, but you cannot force the transformation itself. You can prepare the materials, maintain the proper heat, provide the necessary time, but the actual change happens according to laws that operate beyond your will. This has taught you a different relationship to control than most people experience. In the outside world, people try to force outcomes through effort and will. But in the workshop, you've learned to work with processes rather than against them, to guide rather than compel, to suggest rather than demand. The afternoon light filtering through the workshop's single small window has changed quality. Softer now, more golden. This tells you more about the passage of time than any clock could. Your body has also learned to read the workshop's rhythms. When the morning chill gives way to midday warmth. When the light begins its slow retreat toward evening. You check the mercury experiment again. The cloudiness has spread slightly, and now the water above the mercury shows the faintest hint of metallic sheen. Not much, barely visible, but enough to confirm that some interaction is taking place. You add one more drop of the activating solution and watch carefully. Sometimes in this work, you feel like you're having a conversation with matter itself. You make a suggestion through your preparations and procedures. The materials respond with subtle changes that you must learn to read. You adjust your approach based on what they show you. They respond again. Slowly, patiently, you develop a kind of dialogue with the substances you're working with. This conversational quality is what separates alchemy from mere cooking or simple chemistry. You're not just following recipes or combining ingredients. You're participating in an ongoing exchange with materials that have their own tendencies, their own preferences, their own ways of responding to different conditions. Learning to read these responses takes years of careful observation. The way mercury beads differently in different solutions. The precise color that indicates when sulfur is ready for the next stage of processing. The sound that tells you when a distillation is proceeding correctly versus when it's about to fail. Your hands have developed sensitivities that would be hard to explain to someone who hasn't done this work. You can feel temperature changes through glass. You can detect the moment when a powder reaches optimal fineness through the way the pestle moves in the mortar. You can sense when a solution is ready for the next step through subtle changes in its behavior that are almost too small to see. As the day progresses, you move through your tasks with the fluid rhythm of long practice. Each action connects to the next without conscious planning. You know exactly when each experiment needs attention, how much fuel the fire requires, when solutions need stirring, or temperatures need adjustment. This intuitive knowledge represents years of accumulated experience, countless small observations that have built up into an almost instinctive understanding of how the workshop operates. You've become part of its rhythm, just as it has become part of yours. The antimony powder waits in its vessel, ready for tomorrow's work. The mercury continues its slow interaction with the activating solution. The crystals grow their perfect forms one molecule at a time. The fire maintains its steady heat, consuming wood and air and transforming them into warmth and light. Everything in the workshop is engaged in some form of transformation, operating according to its own timeline, following its own inner logic. And you move among these processes like a gardener tending plants, providing what each needs, removing obstacles to growth, but always working with the natural tendencies of your materials rather than against them. This is the secret that no text can fully convey. That alchemy is not about dominating matter, but about learning to collaborate with it. Not about forcing change, but about creating conditions where the changes that want to happen can happen more easily. As the afternoon light continues to fade, you feel the deep satisfaction that comes from a day spent in productive dialogue with the materials of creation. Tomorrow will bring new observations, new adjustments, new small steps forward in the great work of understanding how matter dreams of transforming itself. For now, there is simply the ongoing conversation, the whisper of solutions interacting, the gentle heat of maintained fires, the slow, patient work of transformation, proceeding at its own perfect pace. Though you spend most of your time in the workshop, the outside world still exists, and sometimes it finds its way to you. This afternoon, there's a knock at the door. Gentle, almost hesitant. It's not the knock of a soldier or a tax collector. It's the knock of someone who needs help. You crack open the heavy wooden door. Daylight floods in, making you squint. Standing before you is a woman dressed like a servant from a well-to-do household. She looks at you with eyes that mix respect and fear. The townspeople both revere you for your knowledge and fear you for the mysterious work you do. She doesn't dare look directly into your eyes, only whispers that her mistress suffers from chronic headaches. The physicians have given up. She's heard that you have special medicines. You don't answer immediately. You simply nod and gesture for her to wait. You turn back to the workshop, not to the complex distillation apparatus, but to a small wooden cabinet filled with dried herbs. This is the practical side of your work. Searching for the philosopher's stone doesn't pay the rent, but preparing medicines does. You take some dried willow bark. You know that chewing it can reduce pain. You don't know that centuries later, people will extract from it something called salicylic acid and create a pill called aspirin. You only know that it works. You also take some chamomile flowers and lavender because they smell pleasant and help with relaxation. You grind them together, not too fine. Then wrap the mixture in a clean cloth. You give it to the servant woman, along with instructions to steep it in hot water and drink it slowly. You don't promise a miracle. You only say that it might help. She presses a few coins into your hand, thanks you profusely, and hurries away, as if afraid to stay here too long. This brief encounter reminds you of your place in society. You're not a wizard, though some people think so. You're also not entirely a physician. You're a researcher of matter, And that knowledge sometimes has practical applications. Sometimes your clients are more powerful people. A wealthy merchant wants you to test the purity of a gold bar. You'll do this using fire assay or a testing stone called a touchstone. These are primitive chemical techniques. Or a local lord, after hearing rumors, will discreetly ask you about extending life. With such requests, you must be very careful. You never promise the impossible. Instead, you speak about balancing the body's humors, about the importance of diet, and perhaps sell them a cordial infused with expensive spices like cinnamon and cloves. It might not make them immortal, but at least it tastes good and makes them feel like they're doing something for their health. You live on a delicate border between science, medicine, philosophy, and, sometimes, a bit of intentional deception. But you don't consider yourself a fraud. You believe the universe operates according to harmonious principles. And helping someone feel better, even if only mentally, is part of restoring that harmony. After the last visitor has left, the room returns to its familiar silence. You're alone again, with your vessels, your books, and your fire. And you realize you prefer it this way. The outside world is too complex, too noisy. Here in the workshop, everything follows clear laws. Though you don't fully understand them yet, you know they exist, and that is comforting. The interaction with the outside world also reminds you of the strange position you occupy in this medieval society. You exist in the spaces between established categories. Not quite a scholar. You work with your hands too much. Not quite a craftsman. You read too many books. Not quite a physician. Your interests extend far beyond healing. Not quite a priest. Your relationship with the divine is too experimental, too questioning. This in-between existence suits you, actually. It gives you freedom that more defined roles would not permit. A physician must focus on curing disease. A priest must provide spiritual comfort. A craftsman must produce useful objects. But you can follow questions wherever they lead, even into territories that have no names yet. The coins the servant woman gave you will buy bread and cheese for the next few days. It's a modest income, but it's enough. You've learned to live simply, to find richness in small pleasures. The warmth of the fire on a cold day, the satisfaction of a successful distillation, the moment when a long-standing puzzle suddenly becomes clear. Most people in the town work with their hands to transform matter in obvious ways. The baker transforms grain into bread. The blacksmith transforms iron into tools. The weaver transforms thread into cloth. But your transformations are subtler, more mysterious. You transform the crude into the refined, the mixed into the pure, the hidden into the revealed. You return to one of your books, a treatise copied from Arabic sources that discusses the relationship between planetary influences and metallic properties. The writing is dense, full of correspondences that seem arbitrary to untrained eyes. Mars corresponds to iron, Venus to copper, Jupiter to tin, the sun to gold, the moon to silver. But you've begun to see patterns that suggest these correspondences aren't entirely fanciful. Metals do seem to have characteristics that mirror their planetary associations. Iron is martial, hard, strong, associated with weapons and tools of conflict. Copper is Venusian, beautiful, taking on a green patina that resembles the colors of growing things. Gold is solar, unchanging, incorruptible, the standard by which other values are measured. Whether these similarities point to actual causal relationships or are simply convenient metaphors, you're not sure. But they provide a framework for thinking about matter that feels more complete than simple observation alone. They suggest that substances exist in webs of relationship rather than in isolation. This systemic thinking influences how you approach your experiments. You don't just ask, what happens when I heat sulfur? You ask, what happens when I introduce the solar principle to the sulfurous principle under conditions that favor the emergence of the mercurial principle? It's a different kind of question, one that assumes matter has inherent tendencies towards certain kinds of organization. The afternoon progresses with its usual rhythm of small tasks and careful observations. You check the progress of a calcination that's been proceeding for weeks, a process of gentle, controlled burning that reduces organic matter to its essential ash. The ash that remains is supposed to contain the salt principle of the original material, its fixed essence freed from volatile components. The calcination vessel contains what was once a pile of oak leaves. Now it's a small amount of white ash, so fine it feels like flour. This ash, according to theory, contains the concentrated essence of oakness. Mixed with the right solvents under the right conditions, it should be able to impart oak's essential properties to other substances. You've never been entirely sure what oak's essential properties might mean in practical terms, but the process itself is undeniably transformative. Pounds of leaves have become ounces of ash. Volume has decreased dramatically, but something essential has been concentrated. The ash is alkaline in ways the original leaves were not. It behaves differently in solution, reacts differently with acids. This raises questions that you find endlessly fascinating. What determines which properties of a substance are essential and which are accidental? Is there some core nature that persists through transformation? Or do substances become entirely new things when their form changes radically? The oak leaves existed as recognizable leaves for a few months. Before that, they were part of the tree's growing wood. Before that, they were nutrients drawn from soil and air. After calcination, they've become ash. Eventually, the ash will be incorporated into new experiments, new combinations. The matter continues its journey through different forms, but something persists. You turn your attention to a different process, a slow extraction that's been proceeding for months. A large glass vessel contains alcohol in which cinnabar has been soaking. The alcohol has gradually taken on a red tinge as it draws certain properties from the mineral. This colored alcohol is supposed to carry the essence of mercury, separated from the gross matter that normally contains it. The extraction proceeds so slowly that you can't see it happening from day to day. But over weeks, the changes become undeniable. The alcohol grows redder. The cinnabar grows paler. Something is definitely moving from one substance to the other, though exactly what remains mysterious. Processes like this have taught you to think about matter differently than most people do. Most people see substances as fixed things with definite properties. Water is wet. Stone is hard. Metal is solid. But you've learned to see these as temporary conditions, stable patterns that can be altered under the right circumstances. Water can become vapor or ice. Stone can be dissolved in the right acids. Metals can be melted, alloyed, transmuted into entirely different forms. Nothing is as permanent as it appears. Everything exists in dynamic equilibrium, stable for now, but capable of change when conditions shift. This perspective makes you see the entire world as a vast laboratory where transformations are constantly occurring. Plants drawing minerals from soil and converting them into wood and leaves. Animals consuming plants and transforming them into muscle and bone. Weather systems converting ocean water into clouds and rain. Even the great celestial movements, the cycles of day and night, the progression of seasons, all of these are vast transformation processes operating according to principles you're trying to understand in miniature. The bells remind you that the human world has its own rhythms, its own cycles of transformation. People are born, grow, age, die. Generations replace each other. Knowledge accumulates, gets lost, gets rediscovered. Your own work is part of this larger pattern, a small contribution to humanity's ongoing attempt to understand the nature of reality. Sometimes you wonder what future generations will make of your careful notes, your preserved specimens, your theoretical frameworks. Will they see you as a primitive groping toward truths that will eventually be clarified? Will they dismiss your work as superstitious nonsense? Or will they recognize something valuable that their own age has overlooked? The wind brings scents from the world outside. Bread baking in someone's oven. Smoke from cooking fires. The green smell of growing things from the fields beyond the town walls. These scents remind you that life continues its ancient patterns while you pursue your investigations into matter's hidden potentials. You're not separate from this larger life, just focused on a particular aspect of it. The bread baker, and you are both working with transformation processes. The baker's work feeds the body. Your work feeds something else. The mind's hunger for understanding, perhaps. The soul's need to participate consciously in the ongoing creativity of the universe. As afternoon moves toward evening, you perform the small maintenance tasks that keep the workshop functioning. Cleaning vessels that have completed their processes. Organizing tools. Recording the day's observations in your journal. Preparing materials for tomorrow's work. These mundane tasks are as important as the more dramatic moments of experimental breakthrough. They maintain the conditions that make discovery possible. They preserve the knowledge you've gained. They prepare the way for future progress. There's something satisfying about this maintenance work. It connects you to the eternal rhythm of tending and caring that keeps any complex system functioning. Just as farmers tend their fields and shepherds tend their flocks, you tend your experiments, your equipment, your accumulated knowledge. You clean each piece of glassware with the attention you'd give to a sacred object. In a sense, they are sacred, not because they possess supernatural properties, but because they're the instruments through which you explore the fundamental nature of reality. Each vessel has participated in transformations that have taught you something about how matter behaves under different conditions. This piece of glassware helped you understand how different substances respond to heat. That one revealed the process by which mixed solutions can be separated into their components. Another enabled you to observe the slow growth of crystals from liquid solutions. Each has been your partner in dialogue with the material world. Occasionally, you hear footsteps passing by the workshop, people going about their daily business, children playing, merchants closing their shops, families gathering for evening meals. You're part of this community, but also apart from it. Your work requires solitude but it's solitude in service of knowledge that might eventually benefit everyone. The medicines you prepare ease suffering. The techniques you develop might someday help others understand matter's properties. The questions you ask expand the boundaries of what humans know about reality. Your isolation is not withdrawal from the world, but a different kind of engagement with it. The fire in your furnace has burned down to a steady glow. You add another log, not too large, just enough to maintain the gentle heat your evening experiments require. The flame catches quickly, sending new shadows dancing across the workshop walls. In the growing twilight, the workshop takes on a different character. The harsh details of midday dissolve into softer forms. The various experiments seem to glow with their own inner light. The boundaries between different processes become less distinct, as if everything in the room is participating in one vast, slow transformation. You light a candle to supplement the fire's illumination. The candle flame is steady, focused, unlike the more dynamic fire in the furnace. Both serve their purposes. The furnace provides heat for transformation. The candle provides light for observation. Together, they create the conditions you need for your work. As night approaches, you feel the day's work settling into its proper perspective. The small progresses and minor setbacks, the successful preparations and failed experiments, the visitors who briefly connected you to the outside world, all of these become part of the ongoing story of your investigation into matter's hidden potentials. Tomorrow will bring new observations, new questions, new small steps, forward or backward in your understanding. But tonight, there's simply the satisfaction of work done with attention and care, of processes set in motion that will continue their slow development while you sleep. The workshop around you breathes with the quiet rhythm of ongoing transformation. Solutions continue their gradual interactions. Crystals add molecule upon molecule to their growing structures. Distillations proceed drop by drop. Even in apparent stillness, everything is alive with process. You are the conscious witness to these processes, the careful recorder of their progress, the patient tender of conditions that allow transformation to unfold. It's a humble role, but an essential one in the great work of understanding how matter dreams itself into new forms. As the boundary between day and night dissolves into twilight, you prepare to transition from the active work of experimentation to the reflective work of contemplation. The outside world settles into evening routines. Your inner world prepares to engage with the larger questions that emerge when the day's practical tasks are complete. Night has fallen. Church bells in the distance announce evening prayers. The fire in the furnace has been reduced to its lowest level, just enough to maintain warmth. Most of the day's work is complete. This is the time for reflection. You sit in your simple wooden chair, looking at the vessels quietly doing their work. You think about the great work, the term alchemists use for the ultimate goal, creating the philosopher's stone. But the stone isn't just a material substance that can turn lead into gold. That's only a metaphor. At least, that's what you believe. Gold, the most perfect metal, never corroding, never tarnishing, is a symbol of the perfection of the soul. Transforming lead, the mundane, unfinished soul, into gold, the enlightened, immortal soul, is the true purpose. This workshop isn't just a place to mix chemicals. It's a miniature model of the universe. Every process you perform, distillation, putrefaction, crystallization, reflects larger processes happening in nature and within human beings themselves. As above, so below. As in heaven, so on earth. That's the core principle. You stand up, and for the first time today, you open the workshop's single small high window. A current of fresh night air flows in, carrying the scent of damp earth after rain. It disperses some of the heavy smell of smoke and chemicals, and you look up. The night sky, unpolluted by artificial light. The medieval night sky is a spectacular sight. The Milky Way stretches across like a glittering river of milk. Countless stars, bright and clear enough that you feel you could reach out and touch them. You recognize the familiar constellations, Ursa Major, Cassiopeia. You know that the planets, Mars, Jupiter, Venus, also have connections to the metals on Earth. Mars with iron, Jupiter with tin, Venus with copper, and of course, the sun with gold, the moon with silver. For you, there's no separation between astronomy and alchemy, between spirit and matter. Everything is one. Everything is connected by an invisible web of correspondences and sympathies. As you stand there, looking up at the infinite sky, all the small, tedious work of the day suddenly takes on meaning. The grinding of powder, the distillation drop by drop, the waiting for weeks on end, all of it is part of a grander dance. You're trying to recreate the work of the Creator on a small scale, right here in this room. You don't feel small or meaningless before the vastness of the universe. On the contrary, you feel like part of it, a conscious part trying to understand. Standing there for a long while, you let the silence of the night sky soak into your soul. No more thoughts about formulas or ancient texts, just a feeling of peace, a feeling of connection. The night sky has always been humanity's first temple, the place where questions about existence naturally arise. Before there were buildings dedicated to worship, before there were books filled with theories, there was simply this, the nightly revelation of infinity spread across the darkness. You've spent the day working with matter on the smallest scale, grinding substances to powder so fine you can barely feel it, observing changes so subtle they require weeks to become visible. But now, looking up, you're confronted with matter organized on the largest possible scale. Suns scattered across distances so vast that their light takes years to reach your eyes. The same principles that govern your small experiments must also govern those distant fires. The same elements you work with in your vessels, sulfur, mercury, salt in their various forms. These same elements compose the stars themselves. The processes of combination and separation, heating and cooling, dissolution and crystallization that you observe in your workshop must also be happening on cosmic scales. This perspective transforms the meaning of your daily work. You're not just manipulating chemicals in isolation. You're participating in universal processes that connect the smallest particle to the largest star. Your workshop becomes a place where cosmic principles are made visible, where the same forces that move planets can be observed in the behavior of a drop of mercury. The ancients spoke of the music of the spheres, the idea that celestial movements create harmonies too vast for human ears to detect. Standing here in the night air, you almost feel you can sense those harmonies, not as sound, but as rhythm, as pattern, as the underlying order that manifests equally in the orbit of planets and the formation of crystals. Your experiments with metals take on new significance when viewed from this perspective. When you heat copper until it glows red like a tiny star, you're witnessing the same forces that make Venus shine in the evening sky. When you watch silver crystals grow in solution, you're seeing the same organizing principles that arrange the moon's phases. The window brings in more than just air. It brings the vast context that gives meaning to all your detailed work. Without this larger perspective, the grinding and heating and measuring could seem pointless, even obsessive. But connected to the cosmic patterns above, every small action becomes a prayer, every careful observation a form of worship. You think about time from this perspective. The stars you see tonight are the same stars that shone on the ancient philosophers whose texts you study. They watch these same patterns of light, ask the same questions about the relationship between earthly and celestial phenomena. Your work connects you to this lineage of seekers stretching back through centuries. And future seekers, not yet born, will look up at these same stars and wonder about the same mysteries. Your careful notes, your preserved specimens, your theoretical insights will contribute to their understanding, just as the work of past alchemists contributes to yours. The great work isn't something any individual can complete alone. It's a collective endeavor that spans generations. The workshop behind you continues its quiet processes even as you contemplate the heavens. The distillation apparatus continues its slow work, each drop forming and falling according to the same laws that govern how moisture condenses into dew. The crystallization vessels nurture their growing forms according to the same principles that organize snowflakes and mineral formations. Nothing stops while you look at stars. The workshop is itself a kind of microcosmic planetarium where different processes orbit around the central fire like planets around the sun. Each experiment follows its own cycle, its own rhythm of development. Some processes are quick like meteors, others slow like the precession of constellations. You've learned to work with these different rhythms rather than against them. Some discoveries come suddenly, like lightning illuminating a landscape you've been traveling through in darkness. But most progress comes gradually, like the slow brightening of dawn, so subtle you don't notice it happening until you realize the world has changed around you. The owl's call reminds you that you're not the only creature active in the night hours. Nocturnal animals have their own relationship to darkness, their own ways of finding what they need when the sun's light is absent. Similarly, there are aspects of understanding that only reveal themselves in the darkness of not knowing, in the patient willingness to work with mysteries that may never be fully solved. Your work often feels like moving through intellectual darkness, guided more by intuition than clear sight. The ancient texts provide hints rather than maps. Your experiments offer clues rather than definitive answers. You learn to navigate by subtle signs, to find direction through accumulated experience rather than certain knowledge. This teaches a different kind of intelligence than what operates in full daylight. It's the intelligence of the tracker reading faint traces, of the sailor navigating by stars, of the gardener who knows when soil is ready for planting without being able to explain exactly how they know. The fire in your furnace mirrors the stars above, another form of controlled burning, another way of transforming matter through the application of heat. But where the stars burn for eons with fuel sources you can barely imagine, your fire requires constant tending, careful feeding, mindful attention to keep it alive. This difference points to one of the central challenges of your work. The cosmic processes you're trying to understand operate on scales of time and energy that dwarf human capacity. Stars form and die over millions of years. Mountain ranges rise and erode over geological ages. But you must somehow access these vast principles using the limited resources available to a single human life. This is where patience becomes not just a practical necessity, but a spiritual discipline. You must learn to work with processes that may not complete themselves within your lifetime. You must find satisfaction in contributing to an understanding that may not reach fruition for generations. You must trust that small, careful actions performed consistently over time can eventually produce significant transformations. The stars teach this patience by example. Their light travels for years to reach your eyes, yet they shine continuously, whether anyone observes them or not. They follow their courses with perfect regularity, indifferent to human schedules and impatience. They embody the kind of steady persistence your work requires. When you grind antimony for hours to achieve the finest possible powder, you're practicing stellar patience. When you maintain consistent temperatures for weeks to achieve proper distillation, you're learning stellar persistence. When you record observations day after day, even when no obvious progress is apparent, you're developing stellar faith in processes larger than immediate understanding. This stellar perspective also provides comfort during periods of apparent failure. Experiments that produce unexpected results aren't necessarily mistakes. They might be revealing processes you weren't sophisticated enough to anticipate. Solutions that remain stubbornly cloudy might be developing clarity according to their own timeline rather than yours. The music you seem to hear in the night silence isn't really sound but harmony. The sense that everything around you, from the smallest chemical reaction to the largest celestial movement, participates in patterns of order that are fundamentally musical in nature. Rhythm, repetition, variation on themes, development of motifs. These same principles organize everything from crystal formation to planetary motion. Your workshop participates in this cosmic music through its own rhythms. The steady drip of distillation provides a percussion section. The gentle bubbling of heated solutions adds melodic elements. The crackling of the fire offers syncopated accents. Even your own breathing and heartbeat contribute to the overall composition. Working in harmony with these rhythms, rather than fighting them, has become one of the keys to successful experimentation. When you force processes to move faster than they naturally want to go, you usually produce inferior results. When you allow each procedure to unfold according to its inherent tempo, you often discover possibilities you hadn't anticipated. You close your eyes and simply listen to the night for a while. Without the distraction of sight, your other senses become more acute. You can hear the subtle variations in the fire's crackling that indicate how the wood is burning. You can sense the slight movements of air that tell you about temperature variations in the workshop. You can smell the complex mixture of scents that reveals what processes are currently active. This kind of sensory attention is essential to advanced work. Many of the changes you need to detect are too subtle for casual observation. Learning to read the full spectrum of sensory information available to you multiplies your ability to understand what's happening in your experiments. The ancient texts often speak in sensory metaphors. They describe colors, odors, textures, sounds that indicate different stages of the work. These aren't poetic decorations, but practical instructions. The successful alchemist must develop the sensory sophistication of a perfumer, a chef, a musician, and a painter all combined. Even in the darkness, you could find any book on your shelves by touch alone. Your hands know the texture of each binding, the weight of each volume, the characteristic feel of different papers and inks. This tactile knowledge represents years of intimate familiarity with your reference materials. Similarly, your hands have learned to read the progress of experiments through direct contact. The way heat moves through glass tells you about what's happening inside sealed vessels. The resistance you feel when stirring solutions reveals their changing properties. The vibrations you sense when grinding materials indicate their structural transformation. This embodied knowledge complements but can't be replaced by intellectual understanding. You can read about the theory of distillation in books, but learning to maintain optimal temperatures requires hands-on experience. You can memorize lists of chemical properties, but recognizing subtle changes during reactions requires sensory training that only comes through practice. The owl's second call seems to come from farther away, as if it's continuing its nocturnal hunt through territory you can't see. This reminds you that your little circle of firelight and starlight is surrounded by vast territories of darkness where other lives are being lived according to different rhythms and purposes. Your work, too, exists within larger contexts you can only partially perceive. The philosophical tradition you're part of stretches back through Islamic, Greek, and Egyptian sources into prehistory. The practical techniques you use have been developed through countless generations of craftspeople and investigators. The materials you work with have geological histories spanning millions of years. Standing at your window, you feel yourself at the intersection of all these different scales of time and space, the immediate moment of your individual consciousness, the historical moment of your particular cultural setting, the geological moment of your planet's current configuration, the cosmic moment of your local stellar neighborhood's present arrangement. Somehow, your small actions in this stone room participate meaningfully in all these larger patterns. The way you handle Mercury connects you to everyone who has ever marveled at this liquid metal's strange properties. The way you interpret ancient texts contributes to humanity's ongoing attempt to understand reality's hidden dimensions. The fire's diminished light makes the workshop feel more enclosed, more private. The dramatic shadows of full firelight give way to gentler illuminations that soften the harsh edges of equipment and containers. Everything takes on a more mysterious, more contemplative character. This is the hour when the boundary between waking consciousness and dream begins to blur. The logical, analytical mind that guides daylight experiments starts to give way to the more fluid, associative thinking that operates during sleep. Sometimes, your most important insights come during this transitional period, when rigid mental categories become more permeable. You've learned to pay attention to the images and ideas that arise during these liminal moments. Often, they reveal connections between different aspects of your work that weren't obvious during more focused periods. A dream symbol might suggest a new experimental approach. A half-remembered association might point toward a text you need to reread. The ancient masters spoke of the importance of dreams and visions in the work. They understood that transformation happens not just in retorts and furnaces, but in consciousness itself. The great work involves changing the worker as much as working with materials. Personal transformation and material transformation proceed together. As the night deepens, you feel your day's work settling into its proper place within the larger rhythm of seeking and finding that defines your life. Today's small discoveries and minor setbacks become part of an ongoing story, whose ultimate meaning may only become clear much later. The antimony you ground so carefully this morning waits in its vessel for tomorrow's experiments. The mercury solution continues its slow interaction with the activating chemicals. The crystallization processes add molecule upon molecule to their growing structures. Even while you rest, the work continues according to its own logic. This continuity across the boundary between waking and sleeping reminds you that the great work transcends individual effort. It's a process that uses human consciousness, but isn't limited by human limitations. You provide attention and intention, but the transformations themselves follow natural laws that operate whether you understand them or not. The stars wheel slowly overhead, maintaining their ancient patterns while gradually shifting position according to cycles too vast for any single lifetime to encompass. Tomorrow night, they'll appear in slightly different positions. Next month, their configuration will be noticeably altered. Next year will bring different constellations to prominence. Yet within this constant change, larger patterns remain stable. The same fundamental relationships persist. The same essential principles continue to organize matter from the smallest scale to the largest. Your work tomorrow will be both different from today's work and fundamentally the same. Another day of patient observation, careful manipulation, and attentive waiting for processes to reveal their secrets. The workshop around you breathes with the quiet rhythm of ongoing transformation. Nothing dramatic will happen while you sleep, but everything will continue its slow development. Solutions will clarify or cloud according to their nature. Crystals will grow or dissolve. Chemical interactions will proceed through their predetermined stages. You feel yourself becoming part of this larger rhythm of patient becoming. Your own consciousness, with its daily cycle of waking focus and sleeping regeneration, participates in the same patterns that organize all the other processes around you. Sleep and waking, activity and rest, effort and release, attention and letting go. Standing at the window, looking up at the infinite sky, you realize that this moment, this particular configuration of stars, this specific quality of night air, this exact state of your various experiments will never occur again. Every moment is unique, unrepeatable, precious in its particularity. Yet this uniqueness exists within vast patterns of recurrence. Stars that set tonight will rise again tomorrow. Experiments that fail today will be tried again with modifications. Questions that remain unanswered now will be approached from new angles later. The work continues through cycles of effort and rest, discovery and confusion, hope, and disappointment. The fire in your furnace has burned down to glowing embers. Soon you'll need to bank it properly for the night, covering the coals with ash to preserve their heat until morning. This daily ritual connects you to every human who has ever tended fire, going back to the first conscious use of controlled flame. Fire has been humanity's partner in transformation from the beginning. Cooking food, forging metal, firing pottery, distilling essences, all depend on the careful application of heat. Your alchemical fire participates in this ancient alliance between human intention and natural forces. Banking the fire properly requires skill developed through experience. Too much ash, and the coals will die during the night. Too little, and they might flare up dangerously. The right amount, applied with the right technique, will preserve exactly enough heat to restart the fire easily in the morning. This balance between preservation and protection parallels many aspects of your work. How to maintain experimental conditions without interfering with natural processes. How to guide transformations without forcing them. How to persevere without becoming rigid. How to remain open to unexpected results without losing focus on essential goals. The soft sound of ash covering the coals marks the transition toward rest. The active phase of today's work is complete. Now comes the passive phase, the time when processes continue their development without conscious intervention, when solutions clarify themselves, when insights mature in the unconscious mind. Sleep, for the alchemist, isn't simply rest from work, but a different kind of work. During sleep, the mind processes the day's observations in ways that waking consciousness can't achieve. Connections form spontaneously. Patterns emerge without forced analysis. Questions that seemed impossible during the day sometimes reveal their answers in dreams. The workshop will maintain its vigil while you sleep. The banked fire will preserve its heat. The sealed vessels will continue their slow processes. The crystallization solutions will pursue their patient work of organization. Everything will be ready for tomorrow's continuation of the great work. As you prepare to close the window and retire for the night, you take one last look at the star-filled sky. The same stars that witnessed the beginning of human consciousness will shine long after your individual contribution to the work is complete. Yet your careful observations, your patient experiments, your recorded insights will become part of the accumulated wisdom that future seekers will inherit. The great work continues through generations of dedicated individuals, each adding their unique perspective to humanity's growing understanding of matter's deepest principles. You are both heir to centuries of previous investigation and ancestor to future discoveries not yet imagined. With this cosmic perspective filling your awareness, you gently close the window. The night air has done its work of refreshing both the workshop atmosphere and your own spirit. The transition from day to night, from active work to restful preparation, feels complete and natural. The embers glow softly in their bed of protective ash. Tomorrow, they will awaken to new flame, new heat, new possibilities for transformation. Tonight, they rest in perfect readiness, maintaining just enough energy to support the continuation of the work. Everything is prepared for the daily miracle of renewal that will begin again with dawn. Everything is exactly as it should be. The great work proceeds according to its own profound logic, patient as starlight, persistent as the slow turning of the cosmos itself. In this perfect moment of completion and readiness, you find the peace that comes from alignment with processes larger than individual will or understanding. The work continues. The stars continue their ancient dance. All is well. The final task of the day is banking the embers. You use the iron tongs, carefully gathering the remaining live coals into the center of the furnace, then covering them with a thick layer of ash. This doesn't extinguish them completely. It only keeps them dormant, preserving their warmth until morning comes. Like storing a secret, a promise for tomorrow, you check your experimental vessels one last time. Everything is in its resting state, in their own slow rhythm. The room gradually sinks into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the banked coals. You return to your simple bed. The cold is still there, but now it's no longer harsh. It's simply part of the night. You pull the blanket up to your chin and listen. Listen to the silence. And now, slowly return. Let the image of the alchemist and his workshop fade away. Let yourself feel your own presence again, lying here in your own room, in the safety and warmth of the present moment. The alchemist's life seems so distant, doesn't it? Full of meticulous work, nameless failures, and a patience we can barely imagine. But perhaps in his secret life, there's something we can learn. The beauty of process rather than destination. The joy in slow, purposeful work. The acceptance that not everything needs immediate results. And the ability to find an entire universe within a single quiet room. Perhaps sleep is like that too. It's not a task to be completed. It's a process, a letting go, a trust. Trust that your body knows what to do. Let go of today's thoughts. They'll still be there tomorrow morning, like experiments waiting for the alchemist. Now, there's nothing left to do. Nothing left to think about. Just your breath, in and out. Steady, gentle, like those drops of distillation, like the pestle in the mortar, like the stars quietly moving across the sky. The alchemist taught us about patience, about finding meaning in repetition, about trusting processes we don't fully understand, about the way small actions, performed with attention and care, can participate in transformations much larger than we can grasp. Your own rest tonight is part of that same pattern, part of the daily cycle of activity and restoration that connects you to every living thing, part of the rhythm that turns winter into spring, that changes darkness into light, that transforms the tired body into the refreshed body. You don't have to force this transformation. You only have to allow it, to provide the right conditions: stillness, warmth, darkness, quiet, and trust that the process knows how to proceed. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of the night. Feel your body growing heavy, sinking into the mattress like the alchemist sinking into a simple bed. Feel your thoughts becoming less urgent, less necessary, like conversations from a house you're no longer visiting. The workshop grows quiet. The experiments continue their patient work. The fire rests under its blanket of ash. The stars continue their ancient patterns overhead. And you can rest too. Rest in the knowledge that some transformations happen best when we stop trying to control them. When we create the right conditions and then simply let go. In that stone room, with its careful processes and endless patience, the alchemist discovered something important. Not the secret of turning lead into gold, perhaps, but something else. The secret of finding peace in the present moment. The secret of being fully absorbed in immediate work. the secret of connecting with processes larger than individual understanding. These secrets are available to you too, not through complex apparatus or mysterious chemicals, but through the simple willingness to be present, to pay attention, to trust the wisdom of natural rhythms. Your sleep tonight can be alchemical in its own way, a transformation from the lead of weariness into the gold of restoration, from the chaos of the day's accumulated tensions into the order of peaceful rest. Feel yourself settling deeper, like sediment settling in one of the alchemist's solutions, like crystals forming slowly in a quiet solution, like the natural separation that happens when agitation stops and stillness begins. There's no hurry now, no schedule to keep, no tasks waiting for completion, just this gentle sinking into rest, this quiet confidence that your body knows exactly how to restore itself, this trust in processes that have been working perfectly for millions of years. The alchemist would understand this state, this letting go of conscious control, this faith in transformation that happens without effort, this willingness to become part of larger rhythms instead of fighting against them. In his workshop, he learned that the most profound changes often happen during periods of apparent inactivity, while solutions sit undisturbed, while crystals grow in darkness, while substances mature according to their own inner timing. Your rest follows the same principle. The most important restoration happens when you stop trying to manage the process, when you trust your body's ancient wisdom, when you allow yourself to dissolve into the natural rhythm of sleep and renewal. Tomorrow, like the alchemist, you'll wake to tend your own fires. You'll check the progress of your own experiments, your projects, your relationships, your ongoing growth. You'll add fuel where it's needed, adjust conditions that have changed, record new observations in the journal of your life. But tonight is for the kind of patience the alchemist knew so well. The patience of allowing, the patience of trusting, the patience of becoming quiet enough to hear the subtle rhythms that connect all things. Your breathing, slowing, your thoughts, dissolving, your body, releasing, like the last glow of banked coals, like starlight on quiet water, like the gentle silence between one day and the next. Thank you for spending this time with this quiet story. Thank you for allowing yourself the space for rest. May your sleep be as patient and peaceful as the alchemist's vigil. May your dreams be filled with gentle transformations. And may you wake tomorrow refreshed and renewed, ready to tend your own sacred work with wisdom and care. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. The work continues. The stars continue their dance. And you can simply let go. Rest now.